What is going on, everyone? My name is Jamon McKinney, but of course you can just call me Juice because that is my nickname. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, into the latest edition of the Juice Alert. If you have not subscribed to the Juice Alert already, be sure to do that right about now. You will not regret it. You can find the Juice Alert on YouTube as well as podcasting platforms. That includes Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all that great stuff. If you enjoy what you are listening to or watching right here on the show, be sure to leave this episode a like if you're watching on YouTube. And also, if you're listening on a podcasting platform or network, be sure to leave me a great rating and review regarding this show right here and share with your family and friends. These things definitely help me out right here in terms of meeting my target audience and growing and enhancing the show for all of you guys to watch and things of that nature. The 2024 NFL Draft is upon us. We're going to tackle really just a lot of Chicago Bears content here, and one NBA topic at the very, very end of the show. We're going to discuss this very quickly, but I want to start off by obviously talking about the Chicago Bears because it's pretty obvious the Chicago Bears are going to draft Caleb Williams with the first overall pick of the 2024 NFL Draft. And spoiler alert, and I'll get into the later part of the show as to why I believe this theory right here, but I believe it's the right move. I do think the Chicago Bears should draft Caleb Williams first overall. But it's interesting because if you would have told me about, let's say, 18 months ago that the Chicago Bears were going to move on from Justin Fields and draft Caleb Williams in the 2024 NFL Draft, I would have kind of looked at you sideways. Now, obviously, history has kind of bared out that opinion right there, and I would have been wrong for obvious reasons. But how do we get to this point? How do we get to a point where the Chicago Bears moved on from Justin Fields, a quarterback they traded up for several years ago in the draft? And keep in mind, Justin Fields didn't even make it to a second contract with the Chicago Bears. They kicked Justin Fields out the door. They traded him away for a 6th-round pick. What? You mean to tell me Justin Fields, this highly touted guy coming out of high school, this guy had a great resume at Ohio State, showed some flashes in the NFL, even in Chicago, and he's only going to be traded for a 6th-round pick? That's astonishing. So how did we get to this point? Here's the thing, people. The biggest reason why the Chicago Bears moved on from Justin Fields and why they traded him away was because the Chicago Bears felt they were settling with Justin Fields as their potential franchise starting quarterback. Think about it, people. You've all been on dates, have been in relationships, maybe even married once or twice. If you're having a great marriage, great for you, but you're not a part of this conversation right here. You ever thought of that girl that you had a big-time crush on, or that man that you treated well? You maybe cooked for him, maybe bought him some birthday gifts, maybe stopped by his work one time and bought him lunch, did nice things for him, tried to be wifey material for him, and he ended up choosing someone else. Some people have misevaluations in life all the time. I mean, a lot of people didn't believe Jeff Bezos would become the guy that he would become in terms of making millions and millions of dollars. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team. So I'm not here to say people don't make mistakes. And listen, when it comes to Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears, if Justin Fields is legit, he's going to do well with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this could blow up in the Chicago Bears' face. I will admit this, but I think they're making the right move. But back to the dating analogy. If someone dumps you or ghosts you in terms of dating, relationships, things of that nature, the harsh reality of what it boils down to is in that person's mind, they believe they can do better. Because think about it. If their dream girlfriend or guy friend came around and was put right in front of them, probably 8 to 9 times out of 10, they're not going to ghost that person. They're not going to move on and try to find another partner they're probably going to try to work things out. Now, obviously, some people, these days tend to self-sabotage, and some people are just never going to be good enough to get married, and they're never going to be, someone that's going to settle down with someone. But the Chicago Bears believe they can do better than Justin Fields. That's why they moved on from Justin Fields, because if you had all the questions answered with Justin Fields, he would still be a part of the team. I mean, he would still be on a rookie deal. You'd be able to continue to build this team from the ground up and not start the quarterback clock over. But unfortunately, the Chicago Bears felt they were just banking on potential with Justin Fields. Right here, right now, whether you believe it's fair or not, the Chicago Bears look at Caleb Williams as a much more refined prospect, even entering the NFL potentially as a rookie. They're willing to work with Caleb Williams despite the fact that he's going to be a rookie this season, and despite the fact that they've had Justin Fields in the building for, 3 years. But the thing is, Chicago Bears waited 3 years for Justin Fields to truly put it all together. And unfortunately, in terms of their personal evaluation, it doesn't matter about the fans or the media. It matters about what that coaching staff saw in Justin Fields. And they thought to themselves, if after 3 years we're still debating on whether or not we're going to marry this quote-unquote person, a.k.a. give Justin Fields a long-term, big-time financial contract, then he's probably not the guy. If you think about it, like, if you know someone's going to be your husband or wife, shouldn't you know kind of rather early? I mean, I understand that, maybe the first, couple of dates, you're trying to connect and trying to find that spark and really trying to, do a deep dive and try to see what their trauma was, what their past relationships are. But for the most part, guys and girls will tell you. When you know, you know. And for whatever reason, the Chicago Bears were just wanting and seeking more from Justin Fields. And for whatever reason, they did not trust Justin Fields going forward to be their starter over a guy like Caleb Williams. Now, again, if the Chicago Bears did not have the first overall pick, then yeah, Justin Fields would be a person that they would continue to invest in, continue to believe in, and, you see what happens. But the problem is the Chicago Bears do have the first overall pick, and the Chicago Bears see drafting Caleb Williams as the potential to dead all their quarterback problems for good, at least for the next 5 to 6, 7 years, hopefully. That's the bare minimum case, because we know Caleb Williams is a super duper hyped up prospect. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I just believe that if Chicago truly believed in Justin Fields and they believed he was wifey material or husband material or quote unquote franchise quarterback material, they would have kept him. They would have continued to ride things out. They would have continued to have built on that potential, because when you truly, truly fall in love with a partner or someone in business that you work with, you're willing to stick it through thick and thin. Meaning, if they need another year or two to figure things out and see where that relationship goes and continue to heal on their own, then yeah, you'll probably stick it out and ride it out with them, because you've already identified that person as, hey, that's my guy, that's my girl, or in the Bears situation, that's my quarterback. But unfortunately for Justin Fields, it just never seemed like the Bears were all that sold on him. Now, you can point to the fact that Justin Fields may have gotten a raw deal, because really outside of DJ Moore, like, what great elite weapons have the Chicago Bears given Justin Fields to throw to? The offensive line was questionable. He was asked to play very early on when he probably wasn't ready to start. But the reality is, when you get your opportunity in the NFL and just in life in general, you've got to take it and run with it, because you never know when that next great opportunity is going to come. You have to understand, people, there are only 32 starting quarterback jobs in the entire National Football League. So the minute you kind of decide to, well, I shouldn't even say decide, the minute that your production dips and the minute a coaching staff isn't sold on you, then they're going to try to find a replacement, because they know these spots are very, very crucial. And like, it's only 32 spots in the world. the margin of error we're talking about right here. We're talking about less than a 1% of people that are NFL starting quarterbacks in the entire world. Okay. So when it comes to Justin Fields, look, I think Justin Fields has potential to do well in Pittsburgh, now being traded there. I still think he is a starting caliber quarterback, but the difference between Justin Fields and Caleb Williams is it seems like you need a lot around Justin Fields for him to be this successful, great star quarterback. When it comes to Caleb Williams, he just seems a little bit more refined right now. And I think he's a much better thrower of the football, much more consistent. I think what you're going to get from Caleb Williams is a lot more consistency compared to a guy like Justin Fields. And there are certain flaws that Justin Fields has that he may never fix. And when it comes to Caleb Williams, he's not walking into the NFL with this, pocket presence issue where, he really struggles to kind of feel pressure. There's accuracy issues in terms of, down the field accuracy. When it comes to Justin Fields, in terms of him reading defenses, it's a little bit hit and miss. So that's how I think the Chicago Bears looked at the situation. They looked at Justin Fields and they said, we can do better. We're not going to settle in the dating world. We're not going to settle in this quarterback market. We're going to take a big swing. And if we miss, hey, we evaluated the situation and we went with our gut feeling. And when you go with your gut feeling, you can live with the result. So that's ultimately how I feel. I do think Justin Fields will potentially find some success in Pittsburgh. I do think Caleb Williams will find success in Chicago. It may be one of those things where it was one of those scenarios where both parties eventually just needed to break up. And it's only for the better because both parties will do just fine despite leaving each other. You have to ask the question, though. Is Caleb Williams destined to become a bust? Oh, boy, it's interesting. Now, when it comes to the word bust, this word to me, in terms of the NFL and sports in general, means based on where you drafted this person, they're not a good contributing factor, or at least not a starting caliber player. I'll give you an example. If you draft a quarterback in the first round and that quarterback is not one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the NFL consistently, meaning they're not a starter, that's a bust. For example, let's say Trevor Lawrence never quite lives up to the potential, because Trevor Lawrence, very much like Caleb Williams, was this super duper hyped up prospect where expectations were sky high, high as some skyscrapers in the beautiful city of New York. I mean, the expectations were immense for Trevor Lawrence. Has Trevor Lawrence met those expectations? Not necessarily, because we haven't quite seen Trevor Lawrence take that MVP level leap. However, Trevor Lawrence is still more than good enough to be a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL. I think anyone would be dumb to say Trevor Lawrence isn't a starting quarterback. So despite the fact that Trevor Lawrence didn't quite live up to his super duper high potential, he's still a very good starting quarterback. So as long as you're a good starter, I don't think you're a bust. I think we can make a lot of sense right there. But here's the thing with Caleb Williams. In terms of the 2024 NFL draft, if you're a quarterback, you might be in trouble, because the first overall pick is being selected by the Chicago Bears, a franchise that has never had a single 4,000-yard passer. Not a single one. Not a single quarterback that has come through the Chicago Bears' door has thrown for over 4,000 passing yards in a season. The best quarterback the Chicago Bears have ever had is arguably Sid Luckman. And I know Sid Luckman was a very good quarterback in his time, but compared to some of the other all-time great quarterbacks, that's not the most appetizing entree, I would say. All right, no disrespect to the guy, but that's the honest truth. I mean, a lot of people can argue the Chicago Bears are a destination where quarterbacks go to die. And you look at, what's the next best option? The second overall pick. Oh, it's Washington. Another place where quarterbacks literally go to die. People have even talked about the stadium kind of being old, the franchise not really having their act together. Name me the most successful quarterback outside of Doug Williams that came from the nation's capital, Washington, the Commanders now. I mean, outside of Kirk Cousins, who had a little bit of a nice stint there, and honestly, like a Joe Theismann, like who's really been a great quarterback for Washington. And you could say that it's all in the players, maybe, but I'm sorry, people, but about 30 years of not great quarterback play, don't you think that has something to do with the front office that's selecting those guys? And when it comes to Chicago, I mean, they've had a history. They just have had a history of not being able to develop great quarterbacks. It's not part of their history. It's a defensive culture, you know? Devin Hester is one of the headliners of their franchise, potential Hall of Famer. He's a return specialist, okay? You think of Chicago, you think of Brian Urlacher, Dick Butkus, Julius Peppers. You don't think of great quarterbacks. But I do think Caleb Williams can put all that to bed. And I do think Chicago has built themselves up to the point where they can embrace a Caleb Williams and get the most out of Caleb Williams. But all I'm saying is sometimes you just can't overcome a bad company. And who am I to say that Chicago or Washington necessarily are bad companies? Because it's kind of a figure of speech. I do believe there are some great people that are working there, but I think even their folks in those franchises that would agree with me that they've had questions at quarterback for years, and they're trying to figure it out. I mean, if you had a great quarterback, you wouldn't be picking number 1 and number 2 overall. That's the reality. That's where we're at, and we have to acknowledge it. So is Caleb Williams going to be another quarterback that goes to Chicago and dies and just burns out and fizzles out, because a lot of people thought, oh, yeah, Justin Fields, he's going to be the guy. And it just seemed like Chicago never got the head coach right. There never was quite a connect. It seemed like 1 minute they were asking Justin Fields to be a drop back pocket passer. Next minute they were asking him to run around and make plays, and it never quite seemed to fit. Compared to a place like Green Bay, Wisconsin, another place that Chicago, is pretty familiar with because they're in their division. What's been the difference between Green Bay and Chicago for the better part of 50 years? Both teams have had 40-plus Pro Bowlers come through their franchise. The difference is Green Bay drafts a quarterback in a year where they don't even need a quarterback. They drafted a quarterback when Aaron Rodgers was still winning league MVPs. But they prioritize the quarterback position. They recognize how important and how vital that position is to the point where they're going to bring someone in even when they have a great MVP caliber guy, because it's very valuable for that quarterback, that young quarterback who probably was very raw coming out of college, still trying to learn the NFL game. Okay, let's sit him behind a veteran. Let's get him in our system for 2 to 3 years before he's ready to play. That's the difference between Chicago. Chicago doesn't even do that. Chicago drafts a quarterback when there are other needs on their team. They've done it for years, and I felt they reached with Mitchell Trubisky. I liked the Justin Fields pick, but I felt they put him in kind of a bad situation at times. Now, when it comes to Caleb Williams, this could be different because I do think Chicago's infrastructure and their roster is good enough to compete. I think Caleb Williams could be the cherry on top to really help iron out that pie, and I think that he could really dead the Chicago Bears quarterback problems for good. But it's something to keep in mind, because sometimes you just land with a franchise that, for whatever reason, just can't get their act together. I mean, look at Phillip Rivers. How many times did Phillip Rivers have to overcome the Chargers' dysfunction at times? And the fact that they were firing coaches left and right and that they didn't have the greatest rosters at times outside of the early stages of his career. And Phillip Rivers was a darn good quarterback, but sometimes you just can't overcome, average pieces and average players and average coaching. But that's where I'm at. We'll see where Caleb Williams goes in terms of his NFL future, regarding all this. I will say the Chicago Bears have improved tremendously in order to embrace a star quarterback like Caleb Williams. It's not like Caleb Williams is walking into a situation where he's on a bad roster. The Chicago Bears won 7 games last season and they're going to add Caleb Williams, and they went all in to improve the wide receiver core. A year ago, they traded for DJ Moore. They just recently traded for Keenan Allen. They got another top 10 pick where they could use that on another weapon or two for Caleb Williams. And the defense has been a lot better than years in the past. And last year, once the Chicago Bears, added a guy like Montez Sweat, and really started to, build up that defensive culture, the Bears were competing. So in terms of situations that a quarterback is walking into, the Chicago Bears have somewhat improved their offensive line. They've got a head coach that they somewhat seem to believe in. I mean, we'll see how good Matt Eberflus is. All I know is that his defense continued to improve as time went on. So you're giving Caleb Williams, decent protection, probably a top 10 to 12 defense, and really good weapons to throw to, So, look, if Caleb Williams becomes a bust, I mean, obviously we have to look at the situation and say, okay, he's playing for Chicago. Maybe he has to overcome some things. But I think the Chicago Bears have done a pretty good job of putting Caleb Williams in a good position to succeed as a rookie. Like, these are some star wide receivers he's going to be throwing to. Like, this is a roster that's been improving over the past 3 years. And if you add in what some believe is a generational talent at quarterback in Caleb Williams, I think this could work. I think that it could be one of those situations where if Caleb Williams is as special as we believe he can be, he could potentially come in as a rookie. And the Chicago Bears could maybe find themselves in the playoff picture or maybe winning a playoff game in a year or two. I think this could be a situation where Caleb Williams is the final piece to the puzzle. And one of the things I like about Chicago is they're not settling at the quarterback position. Justin Fields, there's a situation where he could have panned out and been the guy for Chicago. And I actually, kind of feel bad for Justin Fields because I think the city really embraced Justin Fields. And I think Justin Fields really embraced the city. And I think Justin Fields was slowly but surely getting better. The difference between Justin Fields and Caleb Williams is I think that Caleb Williams, the ceiling for what you could become with him being the starting quarterback for your team, throwing the football specifically, it's a lot higher compared to a guy like Justin Fields. Like, I think Justin Fields can be a good NFL starting quarterback. I think Caleb Williams, if he truly pans out, he can be one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the NFL, no doubt about it. That's how good I believe he can become. And I think the Chicago Bears, it's one of those things where, people talk about dating and relationships a lot. And sometimes, if you don't do the work to bring another person into your life, the relationship is never going to work. Like, you need to have a good, stable financial job. You need to have kind of dated multiple people, have, a lot of experience, knowing what you like, knowing what you don't like. You've had to go through growing pains, because Chicago, they thought Trubisky was the guy. They thought Justin Fields was the guy. But unfortunately, it just didn't quite pan out. And it seems like Chicago has taken away from those situations, and they've kind of learned from those situations where, hey, we're not going to throw Caleb Williams into a situation where he doesn't have good weapons to throw to. We're not going to throw Caleb Williams into a situation where he's going to have a bottom 5 offensive line, a coach that we don't even know if he can win games or not. Like, I think Chicago has really, truly built themselves up. They went to therapy. They've kind of invested into some more tools to kind of help out their team. It's one of those things where they're the man that was kind of dating around and they're kind of just now looking for the spouse. They made some mistakes. They've kind of maybe, fumbled the bag at times with good commodities, but now they're ready to mingle and they've done the work. They've done the research, and now it's all about building with the right partner, knowing what you want. And boy, oh boy, do they know what they want in Caleb Williams, because he's a guy that's pretty chiseled as a stone, compared to some other potential quarterback prospects of recent memory, because I think that he has the potential to be a much, much better NFL quarterback than Trevor Lawrence. I think that he can be a bigger and better version of what Kyler Murray is. I believe in Caleb Williams. I think the Chicago Bears should believe in Caleb Williams as well, and they should be proud of the work that they've done to improve their roster to ensure that a guy like Caleb Williams can come in and contribute and get his NFL career off to a solid start. The last and final question we have to ask about Caleb Williams is this. Is Caleb Williams worth the hype? Now, obviously time will tell, but I'm here to tell people right here, right now, Caleb Williams is going to more than prove to live up to the hype. I'm a believer in Caleb Williams. And the one thing I like about Caleb Williams is it just seems like he's always in control. He's always in command. And I think that says a lot about his character and a lot about his football IQ and a lot about the person that he is, because it takes a lot to really master a playbook at the college level and in the NFL as well. And it seemed like Caleb Williams really dove into USC's playbook. He seemed dialed in every single week. Now, did every single week result in great wins and losses? Not necessarily, but it's not like USC had a national championship level roster and Caleb Williams was holding them back. That was not the case. When it comes to Caleb Williams, he is a special thrower of the football. And he's a guy that can really work in structure within the timing and rhythm of the offense. But really where Caleb Williams is at his best is when he's running around and creating and extending plays. Because that's some of the things you really can't teach. Like, okay, a lot of quarterbacks can, from a clean pocket, hit wide open wide receivers and throw the ball 50 yards down the field. A lot of quarterbacks can do that. Quarterbacks are more talented than ever. What separates quarterbacks in the NFL and what makes a quarterback go from good to great is the fact that, okay, let's see how you are when the offensive line isn't necessarily blocking up front for you. And we have 2 or 3 starters that are going to be out this week, and you're going to have to elevate the troops around you, You're going to have to fit the ball in the tight windows. You're going to have to really, truly carry our wide receiver core. And I believe Caleb Williams is a quarterback that improves your playbook. He's not as good as the playbook around him. He elevates the playbook that is given to him. He takes that playbook and says, okay, I can do this, that, and the third, but let me add on to it, because Caleb Williams is a natural creator. And in terms of the way he throws the football, it's natural, great velocity, really just pinpoint accurate down the field when he needs to be, really can just zero back. And I'll just say this right now. If Caleb Williams threw a football through a car wash, it may not get wet. That's how good of a thrower of the football he is. I think that he is just really, really good. He processes well. He moves around really well. And I think that one of the underrated aspects of Caleb Williams is 2 things: decision-making and ability to run the football. Caleb Williams is not one of those quarterbacks that will force balls into double coverage. And he's not one of those quarterbacks that just makes really boneheaded decisions. I think that he's a really good decision maker. I've seen him, sacrifice his statistics and throw the ball out of bounds when needed, when nothing's really there. And Caleb Williams, as a runner of the football, he brings an added element to your football team at the quarterback position, because it's one of those things where the NFL is very complex. Cornerbacks are better than ever. Pass rushers are bigger, faster, and stronger than ever. The NFL is a different game. So, because that's the case, sometimes a lot of rookie quarterbacks, they get overwhelmed. But because Caleb Williams is able to extend plays with his feet consistently, that's going to buy him some years in the NFL, where some weeks the coaching staff is probably just going to say, okay, Caleb Williams, we're just going to let you run around and make plays. Let's just figure it out on the fly. You may not know the playbook all the way right here. You're still probably learning how to read defenses, but we can still find ways to win games because we're going to move you outside the pocket. We're going to allow you to be this great creator that you are, and we'll kind of figure it out. That's kind of what the Buffalo Bills did at times with Josh Allen, where it's like, okay, Josh Allen isn't necessarily refined right now, but he'll eventually figure it out. Same thing with the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar Jackson was not the quarterback that he is today in terms of football IQ, being able to read defenses. But the Ravens, they just said, okay, Lamar, as a rookie, let's just see what you got. You can run around and extend plays, and we'll figure out the rest later. They were still able to win games because of how dynamic Lamar Jackson was as a runner of the football, and even as a dynamic down the field passer as well. I kind of see Caleb Williams in that same boat. The difference is Caleb Williams is actually a really, really good refined pocket passer. And I think Caleb Williams is going to come into the NFL and instantly be one of the most talented quarterbacks in the NFL and one of the most exciting players in the NFL. He is electric. He's a gamer. He's a quarterback that I trust to build my franchise around. Now, I will say he is a little bit on the smaller side, like kind of barely 6'1" tall, has a good build, but not like stacked out the gym type stocky build. So can he hold up at the NFL level? Only time will tell. And I will say, if you get pressure in his face, then he at times kind of makes mistakes, but that's with a lot of quarterbacks. Like most quarterbacks, if you kind of pressure them 24/7, they're going to make mistakes. Did we not see Patrick Mahomes in a Super Bowl versus Tampa Bay where he was pressured 24/7 and Patrick Mahomes didn't really look like Patrick Mahomes? So that's with a lot of quarterbacks. And I will say, because Caleb Williams is a fearless football player, and I mean truly fearless, like where he's going to run people over potentially if he needs to, he's going to throw the football into sometimes triple coverage because he has arm arrogance. Like he really believes in his physical ability. But because of that, sometimes Caleb Williams can try to do a little bit too much. And it's one of those things where Caleb Williams can make all the crazy acrobatic throws, but sometimes when you're baited into playing and leaning into that play style, it's almost like you have to be perfect. And sometimes when you try to go for the home run ball and create off schedule and try to make these crazy off platform throws, if you're just off by a couple inches, the defense can make you pay. So I really would like to see Caleb Williams in Chicago or wherever he plays in the NFL really just be a quarterback that learns to take what the defense gives him and just learn to react naturally off of instinct. Because when you're reacting naturally off of instincts and you're taking what the defense gives you, that's when you become hard to defend. What makes Patrick Mahomes so special is he takes what the defense gives him. Like he doesn't let the defense off the hook. Early in his career he did, but we've seen Patrick Mahomes kind of, dial it back a little bit and just be patient and trust the playbook and trust the coaching staff and trust his receivers, and his physical ability just takes over when it needs to, And one thing about Caleb Williams is if the defense makes a mistake, what I like about him is he doesn't miss layups. He doesn't miss fastballs. He will make you pay if you don't make adjustments and you make a mistake. So that's what I like about Caleb Williams. I believe in his leadership. I believe in his talent. I believe in his charisma. And I believe in his overall ability to throw the football. As long as the guy stays relatively healthy, I believe he's going to be a high-end starting quarterback for years and years to come in the National Football League. I want to briefly touch on Frank Vogel and the Phoenix Suns. In order for the Phoenix Suns to win a championship, with Kevin Durant on their roster, obviously you still have Devin Booker, Bradley Beal was a big-time trade that was made. I do believe this is probably going to be the Suns, kind of core big three roster for at least the next 2 to 3 years, because the salary cap for Phoenix, it's not really that flexible because of the fact that they made the investment to trade for a guy like Bradley Beal. I could be wrong, but in terms of what the Suns have as far as their roster goes, I mean, obviously you can make a move or two here or there, and who knows? The salary cap goes up every single year. But I think for the most part, outside of a couple of minor tweaks and changes that Phoenix might try to make, potentially if they don't win a championship sometime here soon, this is the core roster the Suns are kind of stuck with unless they want to potentially rebuild. Now, do I think the Suns need to rebuild? Absolutely not. I do believe you need to kind of stick it out and ride it out with Kevin Durant, with potentially a Devin Booker and a Bradley Beal. So that's my takeaway on that. But I want to zero in on Frank Vogel once again. If the Phoenix Suns want to win a championship, Frank Vogel needs to step it up. Now, I like Frank Vogel. I actually was behind the Phoenix Suns hiring Frank Vogel. Now, I preferred Nick Nurse, over a guy like Frank Vogel because I think Nick Nurse is a better head coach than a guy like Frank Vogel. But Frank Vogel's good. He's proven to be a good head coach. He was really good for years in Indiana. He was a solid head coach at times for the Magic. And he won a championship being the head coach for the Los Angeles Lakers. But in terms of that championship win, you always have to wonder with a LeBron James-led team, how much is the coach, really putting into this roster? How much time is he really putting in? Because LeBron James can kind of be an extension of the coaching staff because of LeBron James's basketball IQ. I mean, seriously, I think LeBron, I'm not trying to glaze the guy, but LeBron is in the conversation for smartest basketball player to ever live. LeBron knows more about basketball than probably at least 70 to 80% of NBA head coaches right now. That's how smart of a basketball player LeBron James is. So you had that guy not only being a great player, but also kind of being a great leader, facilitator / head coach on and off the court. So you have to kind of bake that in. How much work was Frank Vogel really doing in terms of coaching up that Los Angeles Lakers team that won a championship? But again, I believe in Frank Vogel. I think Frank Vogel is a good defensive head coach. I think that players respect and relate to the guy. But in Phoenix, there seems to kind of be a disconnect for some reason, and the level of consistency has not quite been there with Frank Vogel leading the charge. I understand there's been injuries. I understand that there is some roster limitations in Phoenix because Frank Vogel's a defensive-minded guy, and a lot of the players on the Phoenix Suns roster, when it comes to defense, they're capable, but it's not their specialty. Like, for example, I think Kevin Durant is one of the most underrated defensive players in NBA history. That's not his specialty. Kevin Durant is an all-time great scorer, not an all-time great defender. Same thing with Devin Booker. Devin Booker, maybe not quite an all-time great scorer yet, but one of the best scorers in the NBA. But he's not an all-time great defender. Bradley Beal is known for his scoring. He's not known for his defense, So that's the thing. There seems to be a disconnect where you have a defensive-minded head coach being asked to coach up very offensive-centric guys. So can it work? I do believe it can work because I've seen Phoenix at times look like one of the best teams in the NBA when they're healthy, and Kevin Durant is playing at an all-time great level, along with Devin Booker and Bradley Beal and the pieces around these star players, because I do think Phoenix has a very talented roster. But in terms of the head coach that is Frank Vogel, he's kind of dropped the ball at times where it seems like the team, for whatever reason, isn't quite always prepared and ready to play. The adjustments aren't necessarily being made. And we see in the playoffs versus the Timberwolves, they really sometimes struggle versus very physical style teams. A team like Minnesota, they'll punch them in the mouth. But how will Phoenix respond? Because in order to knock off a team like Boston, in order to knock off a team like Denver, they're going to need to be a lot more physical. They're going to need to defend at a much higher level. They can't be turning the basketball over as much. And a lot of that falls on the head coach that is Frank Vogel. I'm not trying to make Frank Vogel a scapegoat because he's far from that. Kevin Durant has to be better. Devin Booker especially has to be better. But when it comes to Frank Vogel, I don't know. It just seems like something might be missing. And I could be totally wrong because I'm not out on Frank Vogel. In fact, even if Phoenix has an early first round exit, I'm not necessarily saying you need to fire Frank Vogel because I don't think there is always a way to solve issues just by automatically firing the coach, because who's going to replace Frank Vogel? You don't know if the next replacement is going to be better than Frank Vogel. It could be, but that's a huge risk. And with a guy like Kevin Durant, being 35 right now, going to turn 36 in the 2025 season, Kevin Durant only has a couple more great years left in him, in my opinion. I could be wrong because Kevin Durant, he's a basketball savant, one of the greatest players to ever live, one of the greatest scorers and bucket getters the world has ever seen. So Kevin Durant probably going to be Kevin Durant, even if he's a lesser version of himself. But the point is, Kevin Durant's not getting any younger. And in terms of the lineups that Frank Vogel throws out, sometimes I think he's setting up Phoenix to not do the best. Where you have Drew Eubanks playing a bunch of minutes, and why are you not playing a guy like Vogel more minutes? Vogel needs to play big time minutes if this team wants to go somewhere. And I just feel like sometimes Frank Vogel is mismanaging the bench. And in terms of the defensive philosophy and the offensive philosophy of the team, it just seems like from afar watching them, they're just a tad bit flawed and they're still trying to figure things out. But the thing is, we're kind of getting into the teeth and the meat of this Kevin Durant era in Phoenix, So this whole, I need to figure things out. I need to make adjustments. I need more time. Frank Vogel, you might be running out of time, okay, if you don't get things figured out. So look, I believe in Frank Vogel. I do believe the Phoenix Suns can win a championship with Frank Vogel being their head coach. But in order for that to happen, Frank Vogel needs to step it up as a defensive-minded head coach, and he needs to get through and register to these players, because I think these players respect him, but I think Frank Vogel needs to focus on being much more of a vocal presence, because guys like Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, they're leaders, in my opinion, but they're leaders in their own way. They're not naturally super duper vocal guys. So I think Frank Vogel needs to be a little bit better in that area, make better adjustments, get Phoenix buying in defensively, because if you get Phoenix to buy in defensively, their offense is going to come with the likes of Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, leading your offense. So that's how I feel about Phoenix, and it's going to be interesting, if Frank Vogel can indeed win a championship in Phoenix, because it seems like the pieces are there, but only time will tell in the Kevin Durant era. Well, folks, that's pretty much all I have today. Thank you so much for tuning in today. My name is Jamal McKinney. Have a God bless day. Stay safe, and I'm Ghost.